Today we've got Tyler Ramsay, who's our new ex-recovery coach, newest ex-recovery team member, who's going to be coaching for ex-boyfriend recovery, ex-girlfriend recovery, and soon to be marriage recovery, though we're still building the marriage recovery side of things out. And what we're going to be doing is talking today about signs that might be time to move on from your ex. So basically, all of these things are happening. Things seem to not be going so well with exes. And Tyler and I are going to basically talk about some of the biggest reasons or signs that you should be looking at to say, okay, maybe it's time to move on. And we were talking a little bit before we started recording about how we're probably all going to have different opinions on this. And I actually think that's a good thing. So you can get kind of a well-rounded look at where we all stand on this. But anyways, how are you doing, Tyler?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
Hanging in there. Like I had told you, like I don't want to go back to work because I was enjoying Christmas so much.
I know, isn't it the worst,
It is.
when you have some of that time off? But, thankfully, New Year's is just around the corner.
Yep,
And
another
2021
excuse to
is
stop
almost here.
working. Yeah, right. 2021. Yeah, exactly. So what's interesting is I had written like an article a couple of years ago on this very topic, and I was like kind of re-looking over it because sometimes I've written so many articles, it's hard to remember what I've talked about, you know? And a lot of the stuff I wrote there, I think still applies to this very day, but I think maybe the best way to approach it is just to like let's look at this article and just sort of dissect it and explain it for people. I think that's probably a good way to approach it. So basically we're going to be looking at signs that probably it's a good time to move on from your ex. And I think one of the biggest signs is where your ex won't respond to any of your text messages. And I'm not saying like maybe they've blocked you and haven't unblocked you, but like you have tried to reach out to them 50 times and they've like they have not responded or been responsive at all to any of your text messages, it might be a good time to move on. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. So, but also I think it's important to provide a little context to that too. Like,
Yeah.
were the 50 text like, okay, you were nagging, you didn't do the no contact rule, that kind of thing where you've closed them up to do that, or if you've actually attempted, this no contact, tried, then go back into no contact, try it again, that kind of thing.
So, what's really funny is I made this exact point in the article where I was talking about like, hey, this isn't like you going off on your ex right after the breakup and being like, change your mind, change your mind, change your mind, being a gnat. This
Mhm.
is like where you've tried our program and tried to reach out like 15 different times. You haven't gotten a bite from your ex for whatever reason. It might be time to focus your energies elsewhere.
I would agree. I would agree with that. And I mean, honestly, it is interesting, when you do have this scenario occur, but, most of the time when you do give up is the time they actually end up coming back. And I have seen that time and time again. And it sometimes does take a little bit longer, but I don't know. I'm very optimistic with it. I
Glass
think
half
all of
full
them
type.
come back.
Well, what's interesting about what he just said is we actually kind of touched on this concept a little bit in our last interview where we were talking about attachment styles and how,
Mhm.
a lot of times it's the moving on aspect is very similar to what a secure attachment would do. And it's almost like they can sense that change in you because you're acting real anxious if you're blowing up their phone, and that shift from anxious attachment style into secure attachment style is just something they innately pick up on and interests them.
Mhm.
And we've noticed this phenomenon a lot where you give up and then all of a sudden they start coming back. But usually the paradox is by the time you've given up, you've literally given up and you don't want them back anymore. So
That is actually very true.
so the next thing on this list is your ex has been in a relationship with someone else for more than 6 months. Okay, so this one I actually would amend a little bit because I think this is a little inaccurate. I think it needs to be up to a year because what we'll find,
I would totally agree with that.
yeah, because so this article was written about 2 years ago, and we've learned a lot more specifically about rebounds, how they work, how long rebounds work on average. So this article needs to be updated, and in fact, I think ultimately the other thing, and I'm wondering if I have this on here, and Oh, I do. I do. We'll get to it in a little bit. But so do you have anything to add there? So your ex
Well,
is in a
I think that
relationship.
well, and I have a little bit of a different definition of a rebound because some people are like, oh, if it's within 3 months after the breakup, that's a No, the I defined a rebound relationship as I don't care how long it's been after the breakup. If your ex has not processed their emotions from the breakup, it is by definition a rebound, whether it has been 2 weeks or if it's been a whole year. And sometimes I have seen exes linger for that long, and they will still cycle through rebound after rebound after rebound because they don't deal with the emotions of the first breakup.
So what's interesting is before we started talking today, I was doing a video. I filmed a video on dumper versus dumpy psychology. And I was trying to think of a new I'm always trying to find new angles to like kind of approach situations. And so I went on Reddit of all places trying to like research
Mhm.
what are dumpers saying. I think someone had made it a question like, do dumpers still think about their exes after a breakup? And from the perspective of someone on Reddit, some random person, they were talking about this concept of how they went through a breakup. They immediately moved on to a rebound. They were with this rebound, then they broke up with the rebound, then they started dating someone new, but they never stopped thinking about that original breakup.
Mhm.
And to this day, they regret that. So that's kind of an interesting concept that you just brought up, which is they haven't processed their emotions.
Yeah.
So rebounds can kind of even extend a little bit into multiple relationships if you're not careful.
I have. I've seen it where one because most of the time, I see it depends on. I mean, we're not going to get into attachment styles much but it just most of the time, an avoidant attachment style does that because they don't want to deal with their emotions, so it's just easier to get back into another relationship. So
Right.
not deal with that, and so they're not going to deal with their emotions. So if you don't deal with them, then therefore they're just constantly avoiding them.
Right. So ultimately the next one is your ex has blocked you over the phone and in major social media platforms for a year.
I would probably agree with that a little more.
I think the timing is important with
Yeah.
it. You know, it's like we've seen a lot of people get blocked on both areas and then get unblocked a couple
Yeah.
of months later.
Mhm.
I think that the longevity of how long you've been blocked seems to be the most important factor into
Yeah.
determining like where your ex is at. And I think it was like Carl Jung that said like if you're having trouble understanding why someone's doing something, take a look at their actions, take a look at what they're doing, and that will inform their psychology behind the decision.
Mhm.
So it's almost a good bet if your ex has blocked you and you've been blocked for a year, they're not they're over you. They're moved on probably. They don't
Well,
want to
see,
see
now
you.
I'll give a caveat to that.
All right, good.
I don't
Let's
know if I completely agree. I agree with the part of, yeah, I think you should move on. However, I don't know if I agree with the part of if they blocked you for a whole year, if they have to block you for a whole year, that means that they are still
That's a
not
good
wanting to
point.
process their emotions. The only reason I tell you this is because I have an ex that still does this. So still to this day, it's actually pretty incredible. But doesn't want to process their emotions, still has animosity, for
Mm.
years and years and years. Because if you have to put a block on someone, then that means that you still got hatred towards them to a degree.
Yeah, actually, it's a really good point. You point out the flaw in my logic there, but ultimately, I think this is a good indication of proof that not everything, like not everything I say is the word of God, guys. That's I think that's a problem we have in the Facebook group. A lot of times, it's like you guys can say something and well, like I'll say something and
Mhm.
they'll think that I'm right 100% of the time, and that's not always the case. So, it is always situational, though, isn't it? So
It really is.
for you, it seems to me like the important thing that you like to kind of highlight is the ability to process your emotions. So if you haven't processed your emotions, you're
Yeah,
still
because
probably thinking or hung up a little bit.
oh yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, that's just kind of the way that goes. Now I don't think you should stay around, if they blocked you for a whole year,
Which
because at that
ultimately is what this is about. you know?
Yeah, exactly. Now, however, I don't know if your ex is still over you. That's the part I'm like, maybe not.
Well, okay. This next one should be a slam dunk. Okay, so this is when I was talking, like with sign number 2 or something I was talking about. He's been in a relationship with someone else for more than 12 months. Um well, this is the one little fly in the ointment. If your ex is engaged or married, do not try to get this person back. You know? I don't really know how much more to say other than that. Maybe you can is there any way we can kind of stretch the explanation out there?
So so you're saying if your ex is engaged to someone else, you should not try and get them back.
I'm saying if they're engaged or married to someone else, it's probably not a good use of your time.
I would agree with that. That I would agree it's probably not a great use of your time. However, I actually have a situation that I'm currently dealing with that like the ex is actually in a I would consider a rebound relationship that's been going on for years. They're engaged, but the actual person reached out to the person that's trying to get them back, just professing their love to them as they're engaged to them. So, however, they're still not processing their emotions. And I'm probably giving false hope to some people because everything is situational. But I have seen it where people are engaged to another person and still has not gotten over the previous person.
Well, okay, so this is interesting because to me, the reason someone would do that, so there's a lot of reasons why someone would do that, but also sometimes when you get engaged to someone, it can be scary knowing like a big change is on the horizon.
Yeah.
Um, I remember when I proposed to my wife, I was excited to do it and everything, but I remember literally going and buying the ring and being like, I can't believe I'm doing this.
Yeah.
It's just the notice of a big change on the horizon
Hmm.
sometimes forces people to confront harsh realities. And the harsh reality is maybe I don't love this person as much as I thought I did.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
it's probably not the best use of your time
No,
if you're
I would
going through a
agree.
breakup. Though I will say the one hard line is if your ex is married to someone, maybe not,
Yeah, I don't know.
maybe
Yeah,
not
if
get that
they're
person back.
married, then I would probably not mess with that at all.
Well, that's interesting. So you did have a caveat or a way of
I did.
explaining it
I
in a
know.
very interesting way.
Very, very interesting situation, honestly.
So this is good. Okay, so this one's actually kind of interesting. Religious differences.
Mm,
I have personally had a lot of difficulty trying to reconcile breakups due to religious differences. So it used to be there's always kind of like the white whales in the breakup industry, like the difficult situations that you're like, oh my God, I hope it's not this situation. For the
yeah.
longest time, it was like, oh, I hope I'm not getting a client whose ex has moved on to someone else. But guess what? We figured out how to solve that. I still have yet to find the magic formula for figuring out how to overcome religious differences. Like huge and usually you see this in India or sometime in Muslim countries have these kind of hangups with regards to that.
Mhm.
We've yet to figure out a perfect solution for that.
I think that's a very, very interesting like caveat as well. I think that is very situational though. Uh,
It's hyper
in that regard.
situational.
And I think it depends on both people in how they review religion in and of itself, because a lot of millennials have a very different perception on
Yeah,
religion.
a lot of millennials seem to be more atheistic in their beliefs.
Yeah. Or
I've
they are
noticed.
not don't have those core beliefs quite as much, but they do come from families that have very traditional views. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that still complicates things in a way to get an ex back as well, because you have people trying to please their
So
parent, their family
usually,
as well.
what we're seeing, Tyler, is we're getting the people who are usually the dumpies, the people who've been broken
Yeah,
up, and they're usually broken up with because my family says because you don't believe this, we can't be together.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
ultimately, we're always the person coming to us who got broken up with because of religious differences is more than willing to make it work even though there is religious differences. In fact,
Mhm.
some cases we've seen people who just want to change their religious differences and make it work because of that. It is hyper situational, and
Yeah.
it's always a difficult situation, and I personally think it's probably best to move on from that type
Yeah,
of
I would probably agree with that too, because that's like a fundamental thing that you can't really change about yourself, and that you have to come to those things on your own terms. If
right.
that's something that, you have this epiphany or, this deep bout of wanting to change, well, that's a little different. But not to change for someone and have that kind of core belief change is, it's a lot to ask.
For kind of a flighty situation. I mean, if
Yeah.
someone's willing to break up with you over that,
Yeah.
what else are they going to break up with you over? Okay, so the other one is kind of an interesting one, and I'm not sure I necessarily agree it kills your chances totally, but it does make things a lot more complicated, which is your ex's family has completely conspired against you. I'm actually kind of interested to see what I wrote about this. But yeah, so do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I do know that if the family doesn't like the person, that they're already at a disadvantage.
That's
So
true.
that's just no way, shape, or form. It's just like the friend group. If the friend group doesn't like that, like the significant other, you're already at a disadvantage. And so, are you actually lining up with that person? Is this a person you want to be with? Are you compatible? And so that's kind of where I look at it too, because your friends and family do know you best, but you do have family and friends that are also that can be very judgmental as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, no doubt. To me, it seems like some of the things that I had written here are on the point, but I actually feel like this is a poorly written aspect of the article because I don't really ever explain it other than what you basically said, which is like how the sphere of influence really impacts your chances of
Yes.
success. So to me, it just seems like, hey, this is a more difficult situation to be in. But I have actually personally seen situations where friends and family. I actually did an interview with Success Story where the girl's boyfriend's mom really disliked her, and she was still able to get her ex-boyfriend back.
Mhm.
So I don't necessarily agree with that anymore. I've seen that. Um,
Well, I think it's also dependent upon why they don't like them. Is it some argument that they got in, or is it something that, what is it actually? I think getting to the root of why they don't like them is the key to that answer.
Yeah, for to use the success story as kind of an example, from my memory, it seemed to be that the personalities clashed. You had um, one individual who was a success story who very firmly believed that she did nothing wrong when the mom felt that she should apologize, and they had like this cold war, passive aggressive war over this circumstance. So sphere of influence can definitely impact your chances, and ultimately I think that's pretty much the end of the article, but there's actually a few more that I actually thought of with regards to like moving on or you not
Mhm.
having what it takes, and really that has to do with emotional control.
Yeah.
So one thing that I've noticed is if you're asking me to figure out what the trends are of successful people versus unsuccessful people, one category I've noticed is successful people throughout this process seem to be really excellent at having emotional control during difficult situations. So it's not necessarily like, hey, if your ex does this, you should move on from them. It's more of like if you continue to put yourself in a hole. So like you continue to get over emotional and overreact and alienate your ex,
Yeah.
you're just killing your chances bit by
Yeah.
bit.
No, I think that is the number one thing. Um, as far as in any case, if you're trying to get your ex back, trying to get over somebody, in general, that's where you want to get. No matter what you're trying to do with the situation in general. That's why I felt like no contact is not for your ex. It is for you. It is for you to regain emotional control in and of
Which
itself.
which sounds so cliche, but
I know.
it's just amazing how that cliche concept works for actual people.
Yeah.
You though it's really about buying into the concept. I think for
Yeah,
more than anything, at least you're gonna notice as you talk to people, half of them will buy in and half of them won't buy
yeah,
in.
yeah,
And so like half the battle is trying to convince people to buy into this concept of emotional control
yeah,
because they don't believe they have a problem. They believe they have emotional control, but they
exactly. That's very true. And then we have these cutoffs of like 30, 45-day no con. I mean, yeah, those are great. Like, I think they're like great for like, here's like kind of like a check sheet, if anybody likes that. But I don't think on the 45th day you do it. You do it based off of when you are ready, not when the 45-day no contact comes up. It's like when you feel grounded is when you should reach out. And if that takes you longer to get there, I think that's worth it than
Well,
to reach
so
out in an earlier time.
what's interesting about that is I did read a couple of weeks ago this concept of separation anxiety seeming to be at its height
Hmm.
at 45 days.
Hmm.
So I think that was some of the reasoning behind why we set the 45
Oh,
day
yeah,
rule.
for sure.
Though I will say most of the people who work with us, they don't really have a problem. So they have a problem not waiting as opposed to waiting.
Yeah,
We kind of want people to wait a little bit longer. In fact, I've been thinking a lot about this concept lately of just making it like a standard, like no 45-day no contact rule. Um, because of the concept you just said, which is like it needs to be more about you. You need to kind of work on the attachment styles and
yeah.
everything like that. Recognize maybe how to achieve your full potential in all these other areas of your life. But um, so I'm actually curious. Let's switch gears. What about you? What do you think should be a sign that you should probably move on from your ex?
So this is one that's not mentioned that I've talked to our other coach Anna about.
Anna.
Is if your ex, or actually, let me generalize this. If it was an abusive relationship, I think you should move on. So
No, 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 no. Think you definitely should move
that's a
on.
hard cutoff,
Right.
in my
Yeah.
opinion. Whether it's emotional, physical, sexual, like I have a zero tolerance for that. Like, I am on the spectrum of let's because it's going to be hard to move on from that kind of person. And so like that's when I'm like, okay, we need to get the emotional control for that person to move on, not to get them back. Because
Which
that person is not going to change.
it's amazing at how simple it is for you and I just to throw it around, but
Yeah,
for
it's
these
not.
individuals who's in the relationship and they're
Nope.
just essentially lying to themselves thinking this person's going to change, this
Yeah.
person's a narcissist, they're not going to emotionally abuse me anymore.
Mm.
That's usually not the outcome we
Yeah.
see.
No.
And so there's been a couple cases where we've had to immediately refund people and say like, look, this is not for you. You need to find help. Here's help. Here's a lawyer. Um,
Yeah.
it's unfortunate that we end up seeing those type of situations, but that's something that isn't mentioned in this particular article that
No.
is outdated. I'm trying to think of anything else that is
Um,
I can think of things that are like some of the more difficult situations that I personally believe that there are, but it doesn't necessarily mean you should give up and move on. Like one of the examples is cheating,
mm,
like having your ex cheat on you or you cheat on your ex. How do you get that person back? We have had successes in those circumstances, though I will say the challenge you'll find is really difficult in holding on to that person if you do get them back. And I think a lot of times people don't believe. I think we need to kind of reframe the way we look at people who cheat as so there's this concept of like once a cheater, always a cheater, right? The research has suggested that's not actually true.
I don't think that's true either.
Right. It's
Yeah.
very dependent on the circumstances that that person finds
Yes.
themselves in. Some people are just naturally going to have this addictive personality with regards to cheating, but
Yeah.
most of the people we find that's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of different reasons for why people cheat, but that doesn't necessarily mean you should move on.
Mhm.
It does mean you're in one of the most difficult situations that we'll encounter, though. So
I mean,
anything to
I
add?
think with cheating, I think you need to evaluate why the cheating did occur. So most of the time in cheating in any kind of relationship is an unmet need or some kind of miscommunication error based off of the couple itself. And so that's why the
Usually,
person acts out to cheat.
yeah, usually the communication error is a lack of communication from one
Yes.
side and communicating, "This is what I need to survive in the
Yeah,
relationship."
exactly.
Uh, and
There
what's
are
real
other cases. Oh, you go ahead.
No, 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 you go.
Okay. So, I mean, I feel like there's other cases where you have situations that I just talked about, like a narcissistic ex, that they don't care about anybody. And so they just go cheat and they do what they want to do and they don't care what the ramifications are. And you have to sort that out for yourself. Like, is this a narcissistic ex, or is this, an unmet need that, y'all are just not hearing each other in the relationship in and of itself, which is typically what happens. But there are situations where there are both occurring.
Yeah, I mean, overall, cheating is a really difficult situation to find yourself in. And one thing that shocked me is probably the foremost authority on affairs and trying to understand the psychology behind them is this woman named Esther Perel. You can actually just watch her TED Talks and watch. I think she's even got her own YouTube channel now. But when I was learning about how to dissect cheating and trying to understand like what's the best way for these people to try to communicate with one another, something she said really struck me. And because she exclusively works with the most difficult type of situations where cheating was involved, and she's trying to understand like what's going on there. And she said a lot of times the person who cheated only regrets the fact that they hurt the person they cheated on with, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
They don't actually regret the act itself. The act itself for them was exciting.
Yeah.
So it's kind of this really difficult understanding of admitting that. And also, um, most of the people we're seeing have cheated on their exes. That's usually why. But we have seen a couple of people who have been cheated on, and for that, forgiveness is a really important aspect of the thing. And some people just are not willing to forgive, and that's okay. That's a good indication that you should move on and find someone else.
I totally agree with that. If it's something you can't forgive and forget, it's always going to something that cycles back up into the relationship. It's always
Yeah.
end up eating at it. And
Yeah. I mean,
so that's something that you have to ask yourself. Are you willing to work? And that's why I said self-identifying why it happened. If you can do that, and I feel like you can build trust more that way if you self-identify why it actually happened.
yeah.
So
I mean, ultimately, it's a difficult situation to find yourself in. But if you're the one who's been cheated on and you aren't able to forgive that person, I don't think you're in your best interest trying to win that person back. You're
mhm,
just almost setting yourself up for future misery.
yeah,
Um, I know it would be hard for me personally to forgive that, but
that's,
that's
yeah,
that's me just understanding myself
yeah,
and also understanding my boundaries and my value and my worth. And
yeah.
I think a lot of times people who want their exes back who've been cheated on don't really have that confidence in themselves
That's
yet.
very, very true. I totally agree with that. When you don't have good set boundaries for yourself, you're more likely, because that's something that I have a hard stop on as well. If I ever get cheated on, it's a one strike policy for me.
One strike, you're out.
It's
Um,
a
so
one strike policy.
And so to kind of build off of that, I think one of the other interesting things when it comes to cheating and relationships is everyone has a different definition of what cheating is. Like some people, cheating for them is like if you hold hands. Other people, it's like watching PRN. I don't want to say it because
Hmm.
I don't want Google to to slam our video here for mentioning that. But there's everyone has a different um opinion to
Hmm.
what that is, and that's okay as long as both people are on the same page, and then it just kind of boils down to communication. But are we missing anything else here? Do you think we've covered it?
I think that one other one that me and Anna kind of talked about was like, if your ex has a lot of personal self growth emotionally to do, then
Mhm.
that might be a time where you might want to consider moving on, just because it would take and especially if your ex is unwilling to recognize it or unwilling to change.
so
You
i
can't
would
date someone's potential.
so I would say to that, one of the reasons that I'm not trying to promote coaching here or anything, but one of the reasons why you should coach with us is we will work with you to try to help you identify if this is the type of person that you are with. And I think a lot of times people don't want to admit that they're with this type of person because they
Yes.
know it's one of those things. They know in their heart what they should do, but they don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And so they continue to do what they want to do, not what they should do or what they need to do.
Exactly.
And it's that shift of getting you on board and in line with what you need to do and making what you need to do, what you want to do, the key to what we do, some of what we do in coaching. Because a lot of what we do is teaching you not only how to get X's back and stuff like that, but it really does start internally and recognizing things within yourself that are hard to admit sometimes.
No, I would totally agree with that. And so I feel like coaching, what's really good about it is that you can separate your feelings and the facts. And so that's something me and
You'll
Anna
get you'll get an
talk about.
unbiased third party to come in there and
Yes.
um sometimes it's just good to have someone else come and tell you like, hey, this is what we're seeing.
Yeah.
Though I will say, like, we're going to be honest, and sometimes honesty can hurt a little bit. So
Mhm.
we're going to tell you what we think you need to do, and we're going to tell you what we're seeing, not necessarily what you want to hear. And I'll never forget the very first coaching call I ever did, ever, was this girl who wanted to coach so badly for months and months when I announced I was going to start doing coaching. And she was the first person to sign up. And I worked with her and I kept telling her basically things that she did not want to hear because I was just highlighting this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem, you need to fix this. And I gave her like, this is what you should be doing. And I said, hey, if you want to do a follow-up session, here's the link. You can schedule a follow-up session with me. She scheduled a follow-up session. I got back in touch with her and said, okay, let's talk about what you did. She didn't do anything.
Mm.
It's because she doesn't want to hear. She was hoping to pay me money and have me tell her something that she wanted to hear, and that's not what I did.
Yeah, I think there's two ways, you can go about coaching. You can actually do the personal self-growth. And if you do it, you end up becoming way less anxious by the end. And you also know your self worth so much better, and your confidence level goes up tremendously. And then you're able to gauge even if you want your ex back, you know, or, but then you can go about it of there's other ways where you like, here's the tactics you can use to get back with your ex and not do any of the self growth. And that there's some people that just want that. And there's kind of two ways to look at it. And so if you do the first, you end up becoming so much better by the end, whereas it becomes more of a manipulation game with the other.
Yeah, and honestly, the manipulation game side of things, I okay, so it's almost like I'm really big into this concept of synergy, right? I feel like it doesn't necessarily need to be a manipulation game if we
Yeah,
teach you like the tactics, like,
exactly.
hey, reach.
100%.
If you integrate the self growth
Mhm.
into it, it's almost like it all kind of works together. It's not one smoking gun, it's a battery of options that you're kind of combining and creating this orchestra
Yeah.
I'm going way off topic with my ridiculous analogy here, but you get what I'm saying. Like, you need
Yeah.
to use both of the concepts. And some people come into the coaching session only seeking the manipulation side of things, and we're not trying to teach you to manipulate your ex. In
Yeah.
the end, your ex is the only person who can make the decision to come back to you. All you can do is influence them. We're just trying to give you the tools to influence them the best possible way
Hmm.
that will just shake things your way.
No, I totally agree. And so, like, going back with the personal self growth in general, if you do the personal self growth, you're going to be able to look at the situation a lot differently.
Hmm.
If your ex has that much personal self growth that needs to happen, you're going to be able to go, well, I've done this now. And, at this point, this person doesn't deserve me at that point. And so it just depends. And,
It,
it just
it's
it's very dependent upon each situation. You come to those realizations on your own.
it really is about shifting your paradigm or the way you're looking at the situation, which seems, again, a lot of the stuff we're talking about seems so simple, but it is
It's
actually one of the most
difficult.
yeah, it's difficult to execute. It's easy to understand, difficult to execute. And sometimes you need someone like a coach to hold you accountable. Sometimes getting into a private Facebook group, partnering up with a battle buddy to hold you accountable. That's just the stuff you need. But
Mhm.
I feel like we've covered a lot of the topic at hand here.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, actually, I guess there's one more, but this is an interesting thing that I saw in the group too this time that I kind of ate my own words a little bit. And so, because, we've actually had a success story with it as well. And, this is more, like me and Anna kind of talked about, it's a little bit about personal self growth, but also like with the LGBT community in general, there's some more hurdles that you go over with that as well. And another one we talked about, me and Anna, a couple of weeks ago, was is your partner out or not? Because
Oh,
that puts a
yes.
significant stress on the relationship in and of itself. And there's actually not a whole lot you can do about it. Because if that person's not ready to make that next step, and that's kind of like with the personal self growth, if you're in that position and they aren't, that's really difficult. And I've thought about it a long time before, I kind of wanted to make an opinion about it. If that person is not on the cuff of wanting to do that, then I think it's also appropriate to move on. And so, but we have had someone in the group, had this exact same situation, did the program, did the self growth, and ended up reaching out, and it ended up working out completely.
Okay, well, I think the guidelines still should apply,
Yeah,
like
totally.
because maybe in that specific situation, the person in the time that went by, the person was willing to come out.
Yeah.
So that's when the ball game kind of changes. And I guess it all really boils down to intent. Do
Yeah.
they intend to do it, or do they know they are this way but are too afraid to show the world? I
Yeah,
mean, that's kind of what
exactly.
it boils down to me.
Exactly.
No, that's a really interesting one, because one of the things that we're trying to do a little bit better job of is cater some content to those specific situations that we really haven't talked about before. We're always trying to talk about generalization with regards to our YouTube videos or our podcast, but we are
Mhm.
trying to do a little bit more of the LGBTQ community type content. And that is kind of a really weird, funky
It
situation.
is.
You
It's a
wouldn't
very
think too much
difficult
about it, but it is true.
situation. Yeah, for sure. And so like that's something that, you really like that is very situational too.
Mhm. I mean, first off, you have to be in an LGBTQ type of a
Yeah.
relationship, and also it really boils down to the intent of that person.
Hmm.
Um, would you also say, like, a person who is not out yet and wants their ex back, who is out, does the situation change much?
As far as like the person that so you're
Like
saying
a
the
role
role
reversal.
reversal. So the
Yeah,
person
yeah,
in the closet is wanting their ex back.
correct. Yeah,
Okay. So
and
now
their
that's
ex is out.
yeah. So yeah, I've actually thought about that. So because I'm usually seeing the opposite way.
Right, right.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I do feel like, you have to make that if you make the decision based off of, wanting your ex back, you're going to end up resenting your ex at the end, I think. I think that's to be a very personal choice.
Okay,
And so if you're not willing to do that yet, then no.
then
I
it's
don't
time to move on.
I think it's time to move on. However, it just depends on how much that person meant to you. And are you going to be able to live with the regret if that person were to move on forever? Too.
Do, do you ever feel like there could be a situation where that person comes out of the closet and then regrets or is angry at their ex because they came out of the closet for their ex, but there's all this backlash from society or their family or
Yeah.
their friends who
And
didn't
that's
know?
and that's exactly why I said what I said, because then they end up resenting their ex
Okay.
for doing it. And so that's why I said you have to do it personally for your own choice in case that is something that does happen. Because like I said, we've talked about all of the family dynamics, religion, all of that. That actually all gets played all in this situation all at once.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is very similar to this
Yeah.
religious
Taking all of what we
differences.
talked about and then combining it.
So we've kind of come at it from psychology perspective.
Hmm.
We come at it from the religious side of things. We come at it from like the marriage
Yeah.
versus not marriage thing. Now we're coming at it from the sexual preferences type of a
Hmm.
thing. But that also to me, coming out of the closet is much more a treatise on society and how you're viewed by other people,
Yeah.
and the backlash and fear of the backlash from
Yes.
that decision to come out. which can be a difficult decision, I imagine, for a lot of people out there who are afraid of the
Yeah.
backlash.
Yeah, they're very, very afraid of it. And so it makes getting an X back or moving on more difficult.
Right. To me, it would seem like it takes a really strong individual to be willing to take that risk or go over that line and
Yeah.
admit this is the way I am.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, and that's why I said you have to almost be on the cuff, where like you have the motivation to do it, and you're kind of ready, but this was the push. Otherwise, it's in my opinion time to move on. And in that case, in our Facebook group, I think that's kind of the situation it was. That person was on the cuff, and that was just enough to push
Okay. Wow.
the fear of loss.
The fear of loss, even in those situations.
Yeah,
Um, so do you have we missed anything else? So
I've
you're coming up with a gold. I'm just like reading off an article.
I'm trying to come up with some of the stuff that maybe we were not thinking of, but definitely like the new stuff like narcissistic and borderline exes. Those are a no go in my opinion, because those people are very resistant to therapy too. They're not going to change, and it's really difficult to leave those situations because you feel like they're going to, and you have this false hope that they're
Yeah.
going to change when they're not ever going to.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, too, I think sometimes people in our Facebook group misdiagnose this. They believe that their ex is narcissistic when they're simply just unavailable or emotionally
Exactly. And then
unavailable.
you have when the anxious and avoidant attachment style go at hand,
Right.
the avoidant actually can be perceived as a narcissistic ex when it's really not a narcissistic ex.
Right.
It's an avoidant and an anxious together.
Right. Which sometimes is one of the reasons why they tell doctors not to self-diagnose, right? Or
Exactly.
to treat themselves. So sometimes
Mhm.
it's good to have that third party to say, like, looks like your ex is an avoidant, not a
Yeah,
narcissist.
exactly. Exactly.
Um, I think we I think that's as good as we're gonna do here.
Yeah, I
So
think we really covered a lot, So basically, I guess wrapping up, like summary, like these are the things you should probably consider when trying to move on, or making that decision that it is time to move on.
right. To me, it's almost like, what should I be using my time on? Should I be using it
Yes,
trying to get this person back, or should I be using it and trying to find a relationship that's going to make me happy
exactly,
and fulfilled?
exactly. Yeah, trying to find someone that does fulfill the needs that are going unmet from the person that you're trying to get back.
And if you're sitting there and thinking like, wow, Chris and Tyler are like super awesome, I'd love to do some coaching with them. Well, we have good news for you. If you want to do coaching with us, if you're watching this on YouTube, all you got to simply do is look in the description link below this YouTube video and click on the link. If you're listening to this on the podcast, just go to our website and look for our coaching links. It should be on the homepage somewhere. And you can get an opportunity to sign up with either me, hopefully Tyler, or hopefully Anna, because they're amazing individuals. And I'm going to be making an active effort to try to get them more onto the podcast and more onto the YouTube channel so they can kind of like show you how cool they are. So thanks for doing the interview with me, Tyler. It's always much funner when I have someone to kind of like organically go with versus trying to think of everything off the top of my head.
Definitely. Well, I appreciate it, Chris. Thanks for having me.